The quantum physics laboratory at midnight wasn't supposed to be this interesting. Dr. Ramona Blackwood had expected another quiet evening of calibrating her gravity wave detector, not dealing with what appeared to be an alien spacecraft hovering outside her window. She took another sip of her now cold coffee and watched as the iridescent vessel attempted, rather unsuccessfully, to maintain a stable position in the air. "They're compensating wrong for the magnetosphere," she muttered, making a quick calculation on her tablet. The ship's erratic movements confirmed her suspicion. Whoever these visitors were, they hadn't quite figured out Earth's unique gravitational quirks. The Xylaxian High Commander Nexus 7 was having what could only be described as a terrible day. Their dramatic entrance, meticulously planned to demonstrate superior technological prowess to these primitive humans, had gone embarrassingly wrong. Instead of materializing above the Pentagon as intended, their ship had appeared above a small research facility in Colorado. Status report. Nexus 7 demanded, their crystalline appendages flickering with frustration. High Commander, First Officer Vera 12 responded, their voice modulator struggling to maintain a professional tone. "Our gravitational stabilizers are experiencing unexpected interference from the planet's magnetic field. Also, our sensors indicate that someone inside the facility is taking notes on our performance." Down in her lab, Ramona was indeed taking notes, but more out of professional courtesy than anything else. She'd already sent a message to her colleague, Dr. Joaquin Ortiz, with a simple text: "Remember that gravitational anomaly we predicted? Well, it's purple and having parking issues." The Xylaxian ship's attempts at maintaining dignity were further compromised when its cloaking field began to malfunction, causing it to flicker between visibility and invisibility like a faulty light bulb. Ramona couldn't help but notice that the frequency of the flickering matched perfectly with her gravity wave detector's readings. "Should we perhaps consider a more conventional landing approach?" Vera 12 suggested delicately to Nexus 7, whose crystalline structure was now pulsing with what the crew recognized as their species' equivalent of a blush. Before the High Commander could respond, a message appeared on their communication screen. In perfectly formatted Xylaxian script, it read, "Your gravitational field harmonics are out of sync with our local constants. Would you like the correct calibration equations? Also, our parking lot is empty if you need a spot. Dr. R. Blackwood, Earth Gravity Research Division." The silence on the Xylaxian bridge was absolute. They had spent years studying Earth, preparing for this moment of first contact, ready to guide what they assumed was a primitive species toward the stars. Instead, they were being offered parking advice and gravitational physics lectures. "Impossible," Nexus 7 whispered, their crystalline form shifting through various shades of disbelief. "Their species is still using combustion engines for atmospheric flight. They couldn't possibly understand our gravitational technology." Another message appeared, "P.S. Those combustion engines? They're mostly for nostalgia now. Though I have to admit, they're fun at air shows." As if to punctuate Ramona's point, the facility's automated defense system activated, not with weapons, but with a carefully calibrated gravitational field that gently but firmly stabilized the Xylaxian ship's erratic movements. High Commander, Vera 12 reported, their voice modulator hitting notes it wasn't designed for, were being helped to park by their gravity field. Nexus 7 watched in mounting horror as their mighty spacecraft was essentially given a gravitational pat on the head and guided to a perfect landing in the facility's parking lot, right between the lines of a spot marked, "Visitor Parking." The final indignity came when the parking lot's automated ticket dispenser printed out a visitor's pass and floated it up to their ship using the same gravity manipulation technology they had assumed was centuries beyond human capability. Ramona gathered her tablet, lab coat, and coffee mug, heading down to greet their visitors. She paused only to send one more message to Dr. Ortiz: "You might want to bring those gravitational harmonics equations we've been working on. And maybe some coffee. Something tells me this is going to be an interesting night." Inside the facility's conference room, the atmosphere was thick with tension and the aroma of fresh coffee. Dr. Ramona Blackwood sat at one end of the table, casually scrolling through equations on her tablet, while High Commander Nexus 7 and First Officer Vera 12 sat rigidly opposite her, their crystalline forms reflecting the fluorescent lights in prismatic patterns. "Let me ensure I understand correctly," Nexus 7 began, their voice modulator struggling to mask their indignation. "You're suggesting that our gravitational calibrations were amateur?" Dr. Joaquin Ortiz, who had arrived moments earlier with an entire pot of coffee and a knowing smile, couldn't help but chuckle. "Amateur is a strong word. Let's say they were optimistic about Earth's gravitational peculiarities." The Xylaxians had spent the last hour listening to Ramona and Joaquin explain exactly why their grand entrance had gone wrong. The humans had even provided helpful diagrams, which somehow made it worse. "But your species still uses rocket propulsion," Vera 12 protested, their crystalline appendages flickering in confusion. "We monitored your space program. We watched your vehicles burn fuel to achieve orbit." Ramona took a slow sip of coffee before responding. "Oh, those? They're mostly for satellites and tourism now. Though I have to admit, there's something romantic about traditional rocketry. Like riding a horse instead of taking a car." The conference room's holographic display activated, showing a complex series of equations that the humans had apparently been working on. To the Xylaxians' mounting horror, they recognized them as advanced gravitational field harmonics, the very ones their ship should have used for a stable approach. "Impossible," Nexus 7 declared, rising to their full height. "No species at your development stage could have mastered these principles. This must be a deception." Ramona exchanged a glance with Joaquin. "Would you like a practical demonstration?" Before the Xylaxians could respond, Ramona tapped a few commands into her tablet. The coffee pot and cups on the conference table began to float, their contents remaining perfectly level despite defying gravity. Then, more impressively, the liquid began to flow upward from the cups, forming complex geometric patterns in the air. "Just a little party trick we developed while studying fluid dynamics," Joaquin explained, plucking his coffee cup out of the air and taking a sip. "The real interesting stuff happens in the quantum labs." High Commander Nexus 7's crystalline structure was now cycling through colors that the human eye couldn't fully process. "A challenge then," they announced suddenly. "If your species truly understands gravitational manipulation, prove it. Not with simple parlor tricks, but with real scientific application." The humans' eyes lit up in a way that should have warned the Xylaxians they were making a terrible mistake. "What kind of challenge did you have in mind?" Ramona asked, trying and failing to hide her enthusiasm. "Your primitive facility against our advanced ship," Nexus 7 declared. "We will create a series of gravitational tests that no developing species could possibly." "Counter-proposal," Joaquin interrupted, pulling up a new set of equations on the holographic display. "Since you're our guests, why don't we let you set the gravitational parameters, and we'll work within them. Your ship can generate any gravitational field pattern you like, and we'll demonstrate our understanding by manipulating it." The Xylaxians huddled together, their crystalline forms clicking and chiming as they discussed in their native language. Finally, Nexus 7 turned back to the humans. "Agreed. But when you fail, you must acknowledge your species' primitive status and accept our guidance toward proper technological development." "And if we succeed?" Ramona asked, already sending messages to colleagues across the facility. "Impossible," Nexus 7 stated firmly. "But in such an unlikely event, we would be forced to recognize your species as gravitationally adept. Though perhaps still primitive in other ways," they added quickly. "Deal," Ramona and Joaquin said in unison, both already pulling up various research files on their tablets. First Officer Vera 12 leaned close to their commander. "Sir, are you certain this is wise? Their casual manipulation of local gravity fields suggests. They got lucky with a few basic principles," Nexus 7 dismissed. "No species that still celebrates atmospheric pollution machines they call muscle cars could possibly understand true gravitational science. As the Xylaxians discussed test parameters, neither noticed Ramona sending a facility-wide message. Remember that theoretical gravity manipulation challenge we designed for the summer internship program? It's happening. For real. With aliens. Bring coffee. The facility's quantum physics department responded with a single word that made both humans grin, finally. The facility's main laboratory had transformed into what could only be described as a physicist's version of a racing pit crew. Dr. Ramona Blackwood stood at the center of the chaos, coordinating teams of scientists who were rushing between workstations with an urgency usually reserved for imminent catastrophes or free pizza in the break room. Dr. Winston, how's the quantum field calibrator coming along? She called out to a woman who was elbow-deep in what appeared to be a modified video game console. Almost there, Dr. Luna Winston replied, not looking up from her work. Though I still say using a Dance Dance Revolution pad as our primary interface is either brilliant or insane. Sometimes they're the same thing, Joaquin commented, wheeling in another cart of equipment. Besides, the aliens specifically said we could only use primitive technology. They didn't specify which kind. The Xylaxians had set up their test parameters with smug confidence. Their ship would generate a complex gravitational field pattern, and the humans would have to demonstrate their understanding by manipulating it using only technology currently present in the facility. What they didn't know was that the facility's game room had been used for years as a cover for testing unusual scientific theories. Has anyone seen the quantum harmonics analyzer? A young physicist called out. Check under the foosball table, Ramona replied. We had to hide it there during last month's funding inspection. In the facility's parking lot, High Commander Nexus 7 and First Officer Vera 12 watched through their ship's sensors as humans streamed into the building carrying what appeared to be arcade games, gaming consoles, and even a karaoke machine. They cannot be serious, Nexus 7 muttered, their crystalline structure flickering with disbelief. They're bringing entertainment devices to a gravitational science challenge. Sir, Vera 12 began hesitantly, our sensors are detecting some unusual energy signatures from those devices. Perhaps we should. Nonsense, Nexus 7 interrupted. They're clearly trying to maintain their dignity by pretending these are sophisticated instruments. Let them have their illusion for now. Back in the lab, Dr. Winston had finished modifying the Dance Dance Revolution pad, transforming it into what she insisted on calling the Gravitational Harmonic Interface Terminal, or GHIT for short. The beauty of it, she explained to her colleagues, is that the Xylaxians will be so focused on how primitive it looks, they won't realize we're using the pad's pressure sensors to make micro-adjustments to our quantum field generators. Ramona nodded, reviewing the final calculations on her tablet. And the karaoke machine? Modified to generate counterfrequencies to their ship's gravitational output, Joaquin answered proudly. Plus, it still works as a karaoke machine. You know, for after we win. The preparation continued at a frenzied pace, with each team adding their own specialized modifications to what appeared to be simple arcade equipment. The ping-pong table had been transformed into a gravity wave detector array, its net replaced with sensitive quantum sensors. The foosball table now housed a complex system of gravitational field emitters, its little plastic players serving as focus points for the quantum field. Time check. Ramona called out. 20 minutes until the challenge begins, someone responded. Dr. Winston emerged from under the GHIT, wiping grease from her hands. Ready for final testing. Ramona, want to do the honors? Ramona stepped onto the modified dance pad, and the room hummed to life. Holographic displays sparkled above each piece of primitive equipment, showing complex gravitational field patterns that would have made any physicist weep with joy. Perfect, she said, watching as a small metal sphere floated and danced through the test field they generated. Now, let's make it look like we barely got it working in time. We wouldn't want to seem too prepared. Outside, the Xylaxians were running final checks on their ship's gravitational generators, confident in their superior technology. They had no way of knowing that every energy spike from their tests was being meticulously recorded and analyzed by what appeared to be a vintage Pac-Man cabinet. Should we tell them we've been using these games as covers for our quantum research projects for years? Joaquin asked, watching the data stream in. Where's the fun in that? Ramona replied with a grin. Besides, sometimes the best way to hide advanced technology is to make it look like a toy. Now, who's ready to show our visitors why you should never underestimate human ingenuity? The team gathered around, each taking their positions at their modified arcade stations. Through the lab windows, they could see the Xylaxian ship beginning to power up its gravitational field generators, its hull gleaming with energy. Remember, Ramona addressed her team, when they start their gravitational sequence, act surprised and concerned for at least 30 seconds before we reveal what we can really do. We want them to learn a valuable lesson about assumptions. And if they ask how we did it? Dr. Winston questioned, making final adjustments to the GHIT. Tell them it's all about understanding the game, Ramona answered with a wink. Now, let's show them how Earth plays. The moment of truth arrived with all the ceremony of a championship game, if championship games involved quantum physics and confused aliens. The Xylaxian ship hovered above the facility's parking lot, its gravitational generators humming with power, while inside the lab, Ramona's team made final adjustments to their array of modified arcade equipment. Are your primitive instruments prepared? High Commander Nexus 7's voice crackled through the communication system, managing to sound both concerned and condescending simultaneously. Ramona gave Dr. Winston a subtle nod before responding. We'll do our best with our humble tools, she said, fighting to keep the amusement out of her voice. Please begin your gravitational sequence whenever you're ready. The Xylaxian ship's engines pulsed with brilliant light, and suddenly the air itself seemed to thicken as they generated their most complex gravitational field pattern. It was a masterpiece of alien engineering, a cascading series of gravitational waves that would have torn apart any primitive attempt at manipulation. Observe, Nexus 7 announced proudly, a 37-layer gravitational matrix with quantum-level fluctuations. Even most advanced species struggle to. Oh, that's interesting, Ramona interrupted, studying the readings on what appeared to be a modified Pac-Man screen. You're using a Kelvin-style probability matrix for your quantum calculations. That's rather traditional. There was a long pause from the Xylaxian ship. How could you possibly know that? Vera, 12 demanded. Instead of answering, Ramona stepped onto the GHIT platform. Dr. Winston, would you like to start the music? The modified karaoke machine hummed to life, but instead of pop songs, it began emitting a complex series of quantum harmonics that perfectly matched the Xylaxian field's bass frequency. The aliens watched in growing disbelief as their sophisticated gravitational pattern began to synchronize with the human supposedly primitive equipment. Impossible, Nexus 7 whispered, their crystalline structure flickering rapidly. They're using entertainment devices to manipulate quantum fields. Ramona began to move on the dance pad, each step precisely calculated to adjust their counterfield. Above the modified foosball table, a small metal sphere began to dance through the air, tracing complex patterns that shouldn't have been possible under normal physics. You know, Joaquin commented casually while adjusting what looked suspiciously like an old Nintendo controller, we found that gaming equipment makes excellent quantum interfaces. All those years of fine-tuning input lag and response times really paid off. The sphere continued its impossible dance, now weaving through both the Xylaxian field and the human's counterfield in perfect harmony. Dr. Winston had begun humming along with the quantum harmonics, claiming it helped her focus, though everyone suspected she just enjoyed adding to the aliens' confusion. Would you like to see something really interesting? Ramona asked, executing a perfect sequence on the dance pad. The sphere split into multiple copies, each moving independently through the gravitational fields. That's violation of conservation of mass. Nexus 7 sputtered. Oh no, Ramona corrected cheerfully, just some basic quantum superposition combined with gravitational lensing. We discovered it accidentally while trying to improve the graphics on our gaming systems. Amazing what you can learn from trying to make virtual reality more realistic. The demonstration continued as the human team effectively turned the Xylaxian's own gravitational field into an instrument, playing it with the casual expertise of a garage band that had secretly mastered quantum mechanics. The modified arcade machines worked in perfect synchronization, each contributing to a display of gravitational manipulation that belonged in advanced physics textbooks. The truly brilliant part, Dr. Winston explained to the increasingly distressed aliens, is how we used the feedback from old force feedback gaming controllers to detect quantum fluctuations. Once you understand that gravity is just another form of information, translating between entertainment systems and quantum physics is surprisingly straightforward. Ramona executed one final sequence on the dance pad, causing the sphere to perform what could only be described as a gravitational pirouette before settling gently back onto the GHIT platform. The lab erupted in applause, while the Xylaxian ship remained suspiciously quiet. "Would anyone from your crew like to try the dance pad?" Ramona offered innocently. "It's actually a really intuitive way to manipulate quantum fields once you get the hang of it. We find it's great for teaching undergraduate physics students." The silence from the Xylaxian ship was broken only by what sounded suspiciously like First Officer Vera, 12, trying not to laugh. "I believe," High Commander Nexus 7 finally managed, their voice modulator struggling to maintain composure, "that we may need to revise our assessment of Earth's technological development. And possibly our entire approach to gravitational engineering." In the days following what the Internet had dubbed the Great Gravity Games, the atmosphere at the facility had changed considerably. The Xylaxian ship now sat properly parked in the lot, its crew engaged in what they insisted was a cultural exchange program, but looked suspiciously like remedial physics lessons. High Commander Nexus 7, their crystalline structure now permanently tinted with what their species recognized as the color of humility, sat in the facility's break room, staring into a cup of coffee as if it might contain the secrets of the universe. Given that the humans had somehow taught the coffee machine to demonstrate quantum levitation, it just might. "I still don't understand," they said to Ramona, who was using the GHIT platform to teach a group of junior Xylaxian scientists about wave-particle duality. "How did your species develop such advanced gravitational theory while still maintaining such unusual technological priorities?" Ramona paused the lesson, leaving several quantum particles frozen mid-demonstration. "We learned early on that the best way to advance science was to make it accessible, even fun. When you turn complex physics into a game, people stop being intimidated by it." Dr. Winston, who was helping First Officer Vera, 12, master the finer points of using a modified pinball machine for gravitational calculations, chimed in. "Plus, hiding our quantum research in arcade games meant we never had to worry about funding cuts. Nobody questions the budget for a game room." The facility had become a curious blend of serious scientific research and what appeared to be the world's most advanced arcade. Xylaxian scientists, their crystalline forms glittering with excitement, crowded around various gaming stations, learning how humans had turned entertainment into enlightenment. "Yesterday," Joaquin reported proudly, "we taught their quantum mechanics team to calculate field equations using Mario Kart. They're already talking about implementing similar systems in their academy back home." The Xylaxian High Council, after reviewing the footage of the demonstration, and recovering from what their medical staff described as acute paradigm shift, had officially revised Earth's classification from developing species to unexpectedly sophisticated with unusual teaching methods. "We've been going about this all wrong," Nexus 7 admitted, watching as a young Xylaxian scientist successfully used a modified dance-dance revolution combo to solve a complex quantum equation. "We were so focused on appearing superior that we forgot the joy of discovery." Ramona smiled, remembering her own journey from serious physicist to someone who had helped create a quantum physics curriculum based on vintage video games. Sometimes the best way to understand something is to play with it. Speaking of which, we're having a quantum mechanics tournament this weekend using the new gravity-sensitive versions of classic arcade games. Your crew is welcome to join. The tournament became the first official joint human-Xylaxian scientific event, though calling it a tournament might have been stretching the definition. It was more like a physics conference crossed with a gaming convention, with both species sharing insights and high scores with equal enthusiasm. The facility's parking lot had to be expanded to accommodate the increasing number of alien visitors, each drawn by rumors of humans who had turned quantum physics into a multiplayer game. The Xylaxian Academy of Sciences officially adopted what they called the Earth method of teaching, though they insisted on calling their gaming systems interactive quantum field manipulation devices in formal documents. You know what the best part is? Dr. Winston asked one evening, as they watched a group of Xylaxian students celebrating after mastering gravitational wave theory through a modified version of Space Invaders. We've proven that science doesn't have to be serious to be significant. High Commander Nexus 7, who had discovered an unexpected talent for using Pac-Man to map quantum probabilities, nodded in agreement. Their initial mission to guide a primitive species had transformed into something far more valuable, a reminder that innovation comes in many forms, and sometimes the most profound discoveries happen while playing games. As the facility settled into its new role as an interstellar center for unconventional physics education, Ramona found herself working on a new project, adapting their teaching methods for other alien species. The universe, it seemed, was ready for a more playful approach to understanding its deepest mysteries. After all, she told her expanded team of human and alien scientists, if we can turn Dance Dance Revolution into a quantum physics interface, imagine what else we might discover when we stop taking ourselves too seriously. The Xylaxians, for their part, had already begun incorporating human gaming systems into their ship's control interfaces, though they drew the line at installing a pinball machine on their bridge. Some traditions, they maintained, should remain sacred. Even if they did secretly install one in their recreation room, purely for gravitational research purposes, of course.